I'm 52 years old, and for most of my life, I've been the kind of woman who played by the rules. Married young, raised 2 daughters, stayed loyal to my husband through every up and down. I believed in routines, in decency, in quietly loving the life I built, even when it got smaller and less romantic with time. Love to me was steady. Not thrilling, not new, just familiar. But something happened not too long ago, something I still can't fully explain. It wasn't planned. It wasn't supposed to mean anything. And yet it left me questioning everything I thought I knew about who I am, and who I thought I'd always be. I never thought something like this could happen to me. Please, don't make the same mistake I did. It was a Tuesday afternoon, the kind of gray, forgettable day where time moves a little slower. My car had broken down again, 3rd time this month, and Tom, my husband, was stuck in meetings all afternoon. So when his colleague Ethan offered to give me a ride home from the grocery store, I accepted without thinking twice. I knew Ethan from the few company functions I'd attended over the years. He was younger than Tom, maybe late 30s, with a calm, assured way of speaking. He always seemed polite, respectful, the kind of man who held the door open and looked you in the eye when he asked how you were. And while I never gave it much thought before, I always noticed how his attention lingered, not inappropriately, just longer than most. We made small talk in the parking lot. He offered to load my bags into the trunk of his silver sedan, which was cleaner than I expected for a bachelor. "Are you sure this isn't out of your way?" I asked, settling into the passenger seat. "Not at all," he smiled. "I live just 10 minutes past your place. Gives me a good excuse to get out of the office early." His voice had a certain softness to it, warm, unhurried. It made me feel oddly safe, which was not something I often felt in the presence of other men. With Tom, everything had become transactional. Grocery lists, bills, picking up the dry cleaning. I didn't resent him for it. That's just what marriage becomes after 30 years, doesn't it? As we pulled out of the lot, the sun broke through the clouds for a brief moment. It lit up the dashboard in a warm hue, and I saw Ethan glance sideways at me, his hand relaxed on the wheel. "You seem quiet," he said. I shrugged. "It's just been one of those days. You know how it is." He didn't press, just nodded, eyes back on the road. But something about his presence filled the car in a way that was hard to ignore. Not romantic, just present, listening. We talked about the usual things, traffic, the weather, a new bakery that had opened on Elm. I found myself laughing more than I expected, especially when he told me a story about Tom trying to fix the office coffee machine and flooding the break room. "He didn't mention that part," I said, wiping tears of laughter from the corner of my eye. "He probably left out the part where he blamed it on the intern," Ethan added, grinning. I laughed again, then let the moment quiet down. The city buzz faded as we drove into the slower suburban stretch of Maple Lane. The houses looked washed in golden afternoon light, familiar, safe. Then we came to a stoplight. We idled in silence for a few moments. Something about that stillness felt different, like the moment had taken a breath of its own. Ethan turned to me, not dramatically, not like in a movie, but just enough to meet my eyes. "May I ask you something, Sarah?" I nodded, unsure why my pulse suddenly felt louder. "Do you ever wonder if you're still seen?" The question hit me in a place I hadn't visited in a long, long time. "Seen," I repeated softly. He nodded again. "I mean, as more than someone's wife, someone's mother. Just you." I looked away toward the window, toward the houses rolling by, trying to keep my voice steady. "All the time," I said. The light turned green, but we didn't move right away. He waited a beat, as if giving me space to say more. I didn't. I couldn't. And then gently he pressed his foot to the gas, and the car rolled forward. We didn't speak for a few minutes. The air had changed, thicker, quieter. But my thoughts were racing. The ride continued in silence for a while, but it wasn't the kind of silence that begged to be filled. It felt more like something was unfolding between us, slowly, cautiously. I sat with my hands folded over my purse, staring out the window, pretending to admire the neat rows of houses and blooming lilacs in front yards. But inside, I was somewhere else entirely. What Ethan had asked me at the stoplight lingered in my mind like a dropped stone still rippling across the surface. Do you ever wonder if you're still seen? He hadn't meant it flirtatiously, or maybe he had. I wasn't even sure anymore. But either way, it was the first time in years that someone looked at me and didn't just see Tom's wife, or the woman who always brings potato salad to the cookout. We turned onto my street, and I glanced over at Ethan. His profile was calm, focused. There was no smirk, no knowing look. He wasn't trying to push me anywhere. He had simply noticed me. "Thanks for the ride," I said softly as he pulled into my driveway. He didn't put the car in park, just idled there. "Sarah," he said, his voice quiet but certain, "I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable. I hope I didn't." "You didn't," I replied quickly. "It's just, no one's asked me something like that in a long time." He looked over at me then, really looked, and I felt like I had to do something with my hands, with my eyes. Anything to anchor myself. "I've seen the way you carry yourself," he said. "There's something in you that's still very alive. But I get the sense you've been told to keep it tucked away." I felt heat rise to my cheeks, not embarrassment exactly, but a flush of awareness of being spoken to in a language I hadn't heard in years. I didn't know what to say to that, so I just reached for the door handle. But before I could open it, he said, "If it's okay, could I walk you to the porch?" I hesitated. The rational part of me, the one that managed bills, baked birthday cakes, and reminded Tom to take his blood pressure pills, screamed no. But another part of me, quieter but more insistent, said yes. I nodded. Sure. We walked up the short path to the front door. My porch light was flickering, and I made a mental note to have Tom fix it, knowing full well I'd probably just do it myself. I fished in my bag for the keys, the tension stretching like fabric between us. Not tight, not uncomfortable, just fragile. "I'm sorry if I crossed a line back there," he said, standing a step behind me. "You didn't," I said again, turning to face him. "It's just hard to know what to do with a moment like that." He nodded, hands in his pockets. I think sometimes moments happen just to remind us we're still human, still capable of feeling things. There it was again, that calm honesty, the kind that didn't demand a response but made you want to give one anyway. "Thank you," I said, my voice catching a little. He looked at me a moment longer, then smiled gently. "Have a good evening, Sarah." "You too, Ethan." He turned and walked back to his car, and I stood there for a moment with the key in my hand, the front door still locked behind me, my world quietly shifted. When I stepped inside, the house was dim. The scent of lemon cleaner still hung in the air from the afternoon wipe-down. I set my purse on the counter and just stood in the kitchen, listening to the stillness. It wasn't a dramatic moment. Nothing had happened in the traditional sense. No lines crossed, no kisses stolen. And yet, something had happened. something I felt in the tightness of my chest and the ache in my hands. Ethan had seen me. And now I couldn't unsee myself. The days that followed felt strange, not in any obvious way, but in the quiet corners of my routine. When I folded laundry, when I walked past the mirror, when I poured my morning coffee, I kept hearing his question echo in my mind. Do you ever wonder if you're still seen? It haunted me in the gentlest way. Tom didn't notice anything different. He rarely did anymore. We had drifted into that stage of marriage where silence wasn't awkward. It was just how we communicated. He'd ask if I'd paid the utility bill. I'd ask if he remembered to take the trash out. We slept side by side, back to back, our conversations mostly about schedules, not feelings. I didn't resent him. I honestly didn't. But there was a growing sense inside me that I had started disappearing, first slowly, then all at once. Then, 2 days later, Ethan texted. Ethan, I hope this isn't crossing any lines, but I'm headed out for coffee in a bit if you'd like to join. No pressure. I stared at the message for a long time. I could have ignored it. Should have, maybe. But I didn't. Me? Where? We met at a small place on the corner of 5th and Lawson. It wasn't fancy. Just a cozy coffee shop with ivy crawling up the side and windows that always fogged in the morning. I got there early and chose a booth near the back, partly to feel safe, partly to stay unseen. When he arrived, he looked surprised to see me already there. But then again, I was surprised at myself too. He slid into the seat across from me and gave a quiet smile. Thank you for coming. I almost didn't, I said truthfully, stirring my coffee though I hadn't added anything to it. I know. There was a silence. But again, not uncomfortable, just thoughtful. I've been thinking about what you said, I finally admitted. About being seen. He leaned forward slightly, listening. I guess I didn't realize how much I missed it. Not attention, but just someone noticing. Someone seeing past the surface. He nodded. We spend so much time taking care of others that we forget to check in with ourselves. It's easy to get lost. I think I got lost a while ago, I said quietly. Neither of us said anything for a moment. Then, without changing his tone or posture, Ethan said, I don't want to complicate your life, Sarah. That's not why I reached out. I enjoyed talking to you. That's all. And it was the sincerity in his voice that undid me, not flirtation, not suggestion. Just human kindness. It felt rare. Sacred, almost. We talked for nearly an hour, about nothing important, and yet everything. Our childhoods, our favorite meals, the music we listened to when we couldn't sleep. I told him I used to dance alone in the kitchen when the kids were little, just to feel alive. He smiled like that was the most beautiful thing he'd heard all week. When we finally stood to leave, we hesitated again. That now familiar pause that settled between us like a soft veil. He opened the door for me, and as I stepped out into the light, he said, Sarah, if you ever need to talk, or just breathe differently for a while, I'm here. I nodded, holding his gaze for a heartbeat longer than I should have. Thank you. We went our separate ways on that sidewalk. No touches, no promises, just an understanding. But that night, as I lay in bed next to Tom, his back turned to me, breathing slow and even, I felt something stir inside me. Not guilt, not regret, just awareness. Something had changed, and for the first time in years, I wasn't sure what came next. A week passed. I didn't see Ethan, didn't hear from him. and I didn't reach out either. Not because I didn't want to, but because I needed space to understand what was happening inside me. I walked through my days like a woman carrying an invisible question in her pocket. It wasn't about Ethan. Not really. It was about me. Who had I become? Who was I still allowed to be? One evening, after Tom had gone upstairs to watch the news, I stayed back in the kitchen, wiping the same clean counter over and over. My reflection in the window stared back at me, older, softer, but still here. Still someone. I thought of the version of me from years ago, before the marriage settled into habit, before the girls left for college, before the quiet became so loud. That woman danced barefoot on tile floors, made messes in the kitchen, read poetry late at night. That woman hadn't vanished. She was just waiting. And somehow, a single question from a man I barely knew had cracked the shell I'd built around her. That night, I told Tom I needed to talk. We sat at the dining room table, just like we had when we were young and broke and dreaming. I looked at him, really looked. The man I'd built a life with. The father of my children. My partner, even now.